What's up, guys? Today we will be going over the two-tailed fox and seeing how how good it is. So the exotic perk is shoot 2 rockets, 1 void and 1 solar that can track. Then the other exotic perk is the void rocket suppresses enemies, the solar rocket causes damage over time. So it's pretty interesting, it sounds interesting. So we're going to be comparing it to things like Bad Omens with cluster bombs, then also the Wardcliff coil, which is arguably the best exotic rocket launcher in the game. So this weapon is pretty interesting. So for every single rocket that you have, it actually shoots 2 at a time, one right after the other, which is pretty interesting. So there's a few interesting things about this gun. First, it has tracking, and you can tell when it's locked on by the little reticle in the bottom right of the sight. It lights up like the eyes and the ears, as you see in the bottom right there. It just lights up like a bright pink, which is a pretty cool feature. And the other part about this gun is the void rocket suppresses and the solar one causes damage over time, as you see right there. That is the damage over time, but unfortunately in Destiny, you cannot suppress ultras, which are like all the bosses in lost sectors, strikes, raids, all that good stuff. So when you're shooting a rocket at these enemies, the first one doesn't actually do what it's intended to do at all. The ammo economy for this weapon is actually pretty good. It works with rocket launcher reserves, so usually you'd hold 5. With 1 reserve perk, I can now hold 6. I'm going to go ahead and slap on 2 rocket launcher reserves, 1 on my helmet, 1 on my class item. I will be able to hold 7 rockets, which is 7 void and 7 solar, so 14 in total if you want to think about it like that, which actually isn't that bad at all. Now I'll start breaking down the damage of this rocket launcher. So shooting both rockets and slowing it down, I went frame by frame and counted up how much it hit and shot multiple rockets to make sure. It hits exactly 12,351 damage per shot, which is like 2 rockets per shot. Now let's test the rate of fire of the weapon, and this is me clicking as fast as humanly possible. And this is how long it takes to shoot extra shots. They try to balance this weapon by making it have a long rate of fire, which is silly. So I shot 5 right there, and it took 11.76 seconds, which means the damage per second of the two-tailed fox is 5,251. Now let's compare it to something like the Bad Omens, which is the best legendary rocket launcher in the game currently, because it can get cluster bombs, field prep, and is a 25 RPM. It can hold up to 9, which was also shown off there with all the perks. So once again, I shot this rocket a bunch of times as clusters, so a ton of RNG. I tried to find like an average, and the rocket always hit 6,438, then the clusters was roughly around 1,000, so on average we're going to say it roughly hit 75,000 damage per shot. But clusters will never be consistent, it'll change depending on the enemy and like how many clusters hit, so it's very inconsistent. But testing the rate of fire, it took 4.434 seconds to shoot 5 again, which means the Bad Omens with cluster bombs does 8,457 damage per second. The final contender we're going to look at is the Wardcliff coil, which was like the go-to year 1 exotic for the longest time up until they nerfed the glitch with it. But it's actually still an extremely good weapon. So once again, shooting multiple shots at this guy, going frame by frame, enhancing the image, I got roughly 15,474 damage per rocket shot, which makes sense because it did, you know, like 15-20% more damage than two-tailed fox, according to the health bar on the ogre, so that would actually line up with the numbers. Then shooting 5 shots with this, it's actually pretty quick, way faster than the two-tailed fox, taking 5.752 seconds. So the damage per second of the coil is 13,451, which is over 2.5x that of the two-tailed fox. Before I get into my final breakdown of the weapon, let's talk about it in Crucible and game it real quick. In Crucible, it has extremely good tracking, almost like truth level tracking from D1 if you know what that is. But you want to get 2 rockets. But if you want like 2 or 3 guaranteed kills, it's pretty easy gun to use, so I can definitely see a type of player wanting to use that. But there's definitely better options if you know how to use them, such as the Thunderlord, or like the Queenbreaker's bow, or you know, anything like that, or Darcy or whatever. And the same thing can be said about Gambit. If you want 2 or 3 guaranteed kills very easily, sure, go for it. But if you want to get like team wipes, there's much better options. So let's break down this gun overall. First thing I want to talk about is the design process of this gun. In my head, I think this is how it went. So they were like, in Forsaken, we want a new exotic rocket launcher, and they're like, anyone got any good ideas? And some guy was like, let's make a rocket that shoots 2 rockets at once. And everyone was like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. And I agree, that does sound like a good idea. Let's make each of the 2 rockets from each shot different element types. Yeah, that seems like a good idea, I like that. We can make one void, and it can suppress. Then we can make one solar, which gives it like a solar like burn over time. Like, this seems like a really good idea. I like this. So they went with it. and, you know, made the weapon. But I don't think at any point in time they actually thought it through and asked themselves if it actually made sense, because cool ideas do not equal good ideas. For example, the first rocket, the void one that suppresses, in Destiny you cannot suppress ultras, which for the most part when you're shooting a rocket launcher at enemies, it's gonna be at bosses, so the first rocket doesn't actually do anything against them. So it only works versus majors and red bars, but if you're shooting a rocket at a red bar or a major, it's generally gonna kill them, so it doesn't even matter if they're suppressed anyways if they're dead. Then the second one, the solar burn one, it's a cool idea, but the amount of damage the solar burn actually adds to the total damage of the rocket is like less than 5% of its total damage, which, I mean, that is 5%, but it's not that noticeable. So really when it comes down to it, it's just a rocket that shoots 2 rockets at once, and the actual effects of the rockets don't really matter that much. Some things that they could have done is the first rocket could have been, you know, kind of like the tractor cannon, where it applies, you know, a buff to void damage, solar damage, arc damage, you know, kinetic damage, the same way tractor cannon does right now, but maybe only for like, you know, 3 seconds or whatever, instead of like the full 10 seconds that tractor cannon does. That would have made it a lot more usable. Then the second rocket could have been just like a regular cluster rocket, and if they did something like that with this gun, it would actually be probably extremely good and actually be usable, and it would be one of the top tier weapons in PvE. Then on top of all of this, since they shot 2 rockets at once, they were like, okay, we have to balance this somehow. And they're like, what's the way we're gonna balance it? Well, they said, let's slow down the rate of fire like crazy, so even if you're in like a Lunafaction Rift or beyond a Rally Barricade, it still shoots extremely slow. That way it balances out. But as you see in practice and with the numbers, they actually balanced it way too hard, and the rate of fire is extremely slow. It takes 2 seconds to shoot like another shot, which is absurd. So without like drastically changing this gun, I think they could buff it by, you know, increasing the rate of fire a bit, and I think that would make it a little bit more usable. But currently the only thing it really has over some of the other rockets in the game is like tracking, and that's kind of it, but you can also get tracking on Bad Omens with Cluster, and it's actually the creative role. To take a pause from bashing the weapon for a second, it actually really isn't that bad in a way. It packs a pretty good punch per shot. As you saw, the total damage was like 12,000 or whatever, compared to Bad Omens, which was like 7,500, and Coil, which was like 15,000. So it actually packs a pretty good punch per shot, and you can do that from range with tracking. Compared to the Coil, you have to be up close, almost in shotgun range. So it's definitely not a DPS weapon, but it could be actually pretty good at clearing out adds from a range if you couldn't get close enough with the Coil. So for right now, in something like PvP, it's like 2 or 3 guaranteed easy kills, but I'd rather use something like the Thunderlord or something else like that I can get, you know, 6+ kills with. Then in Gambit, it's not even close to a good option. Once again, it's like 2 free kills, but, you know, that's not much over like 2 invades per round. Then in PvE, if I wanted to use a slow rate of fire, high damage per shot weapon, I'd be using 1000 Voices any day over this. And then if I was using a rocket for ad clear, I'd be using Coil. If I was using a rocket for damage, I'd be using Bad Omens. So it kind of doesn't fit in anywhere in the game, in my opinion. But the good news is, it actually is a really good idea that with some tweaks, I think could actually be one of the top tier guns in the game. And those tweaks, as mentioned before, is increase the rate of fire, then also maybe eventually rework how the rockets work. Anyways, let me know what you think about my analysis of this gun, if you like the changes I proposed, and if you have the weapon, what do you think about it? Anyways, thanks for watching, catch you guys next time.
They're using void light to summon something down there.
Hello? Anyone there? Commander Zavala, can you hear me?
These are fueling that summoning.
I believe the Red Legion is to blame. Hey, who wants to bet the facts tear us all apart, right?
Someone up there. got stuck stealing from